In the summer of 1993, St. Louis was hit by some really unusual and heavy rain. The city faced a season of nonstop rain, leading to one of the worst floods in its history. On one specific day, a sudden and heavy downpour at Cliff Cave Park turned what was meant to be a fun trip into a terrifying nightmare. This is the incredible story of 13-year-old Gary Maher, who found himself in a life-threatening situation and survived against all odds. Gary's troubled life before the flood. Gary Maher was a young teenager caught in a cycle of trouble. At just 13 years old, Gary had begun to make poor choices. He had started hanging out with a problematic crowd, staying out late, and getting into trouble with the police. His mother was deeply concerned about his future. She lived in a tough neighborhood plagued by crime and poverty, and she worried that the environment was negatively influencing Gary. To help steer him back on track, Gary's mother made the difficult decision to send him to St. Joseph's Home for Boys. This was a place designed to help troubled youths like Gary. Although it was a hard choice, she hoped that being in a structured environment would provide him with the guidance he needed. Gary was allowed to come home only every other weekend until his behavior improved. The day of the flood, an unexpected adventure. As Gary began adjusting to life at the boys' home, the Midwest was experiencing unprecedented rainfall. The region was suffering from severe flooding that had caused widespread damage, with many people losing their homes and lives. On one particular day, after a break in the rain, the staff at St. Joseph's Home decided to take the boys on an outing to Cliff Cave Park. Despite road closure signs warning of potential dangers, the group decided to proceed. They were excited about exploring the cave and enjoying the sunny weather. Upon reaching the cave, the boys and their counselors noticed that the cave entrance appeared unaffected by the recent floods. Eager to explore, they ignored the road closure signs and entered the cave. The group consisted of 16 boys aged between 7 to 14, along with 4 counselors. Exploring the cave, a dangerous choice. The cave seemed safe at first. The boys began climbing rocks and exploring the wide entrance. One of the counselors, who was experienced in caving, suggested exploring deeper into the cave. 5 boys, including Gary, volunteered to go further in. They were reassured by the presence of 2 counselors and entered the main tunnel. The cave's main passage was initially wide, but it soon narrowed into a smaller tunnel. The further they went, the more complex the cave became, with numerous side passages branching off. As they ventured deeper, they noticed a small stream at the bottom of the cave, which slowly started rising. The sudden torrential downpour. On that fateful day, a heavy rainstorm began outside while the group was still exploring the cave. Initially, the boys did not realize the gravity of the situation. The water level around their ankles remained fairly steady. However, the situation quickly deteriorated as the storm intensified. Water began pouring in from the cave's ceiling and walls, creating waterfalls and rapidly rising water levels. The boys and counselors were overwhelmed by the sudden influx of water. Panic spread as they tried to make their way back to the cave entrance. The floodwaters surged violently, sweeping them off their feet and pulling them back into the dark, submerged cave. Desperate search and rescue efforts. Outside the cave, the ground was completely soaked and couldn't take in any more water. The extra water quickly filled up sinkholes and low spots, causing the cave to flood much faster than usual. The group outside climbed to higher ground and called 911, hoping for a rescue. Rescue teams arrived in about 30 minutes, but the situation was serious. They found 3 bodies near the cave entrance, caught in debris and trees. This left 4 people still missing inside the cave. As night came, the rescuers kept searching. They checked the riverbanks and cave entrance, worried that some of the missing people might have been carried downstream toward the Mississippi River. Experienced cavers helping with the search didn't think they would find any survivors due to the tough conditions. They faced a significant challenge, searching the drapery crawl, a narrow and low passage within the cave. This area is only 2 to 3 feet high and requires crawling on your stomach for up to 45 minutes to get through. The night before, the passage was completely flooded, making it impossible to search. The rescuers had to wait until the next morning for the water to recede enough to access this part of the cave. The search continues, finding Gary. The following morning, with the water levels receding, search teams returned to the cave. They ventured into the Drapery Crawl, a narrow passage that had been completely flooded the previous night. As they moved through the cave, they heard a faint noise. Initially, they thought it was from other searchers, but soon they recognized it as a small, desperate voice. Gary Maher's voice, calling from the darkness, guided rescuers to him. He was found in a small, cramped chamber, standing on a narrow ledge just a few inches wide. The ledge was barely big enough for him to stand on, with cold water receding below him. If he had lost his balance, he would have faced certain death from hypothermia long before being rescued. The miraculous rescue and aftermath. The rescuers carefully brought Gary out of the cave after he'd been trapped in the dark and cold for nearly 24 hours. Despite the scary and tough situation, Gary was strong and thankful to be rescued. Gary's survival was a rare bit of good news in an otherwise tragic event. Unfortunately, the other 6 people who went into the cave that day did not make it. Gary's story reminds us of how important it is to follow safety warnings, especially when the weather is bad. It shows how fragile life can be and why we need to be careful on every adventure. After Gary was rescued, his mother was incredibly relieved and grateful to have him back. Even though the situation was very hard, she was so happy that Gary had survived. She couldn't stand the thought of losing him and wanted to keep him safe and close. This experience made her realize how precious life is and how important it is to appreciate every moment with the people we love. Gary Maher's story teaches us about the importance of staying safe and paying attention to warnings. Tell us in the comments section below. If Gary Maher's story moved you and you found it informative, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of courage, survival, and vital lessons. Remember to always prioritize safety in all situations to protect yourself and others.